Welcome back, everybody. It is that time again. We're going to do the Radio Free Freedonia podcast. Tonight, we're going to talk about trains with our glorious friend and line developer for 1879, Brad. We're going to talk about trains as a tool in RPGs. So I think lots of fun all over the place. You guys want to say hi?
Okay.
Well, I'm Brad, so I'll say hi so you can recognize my voice.
Hello?
Eh,
Sorry?
Okay.
And I'll
Thank
say
you.
hi as well.
Thank
Ha.
you. See? Now, tonight is a little strange because I am apparently live before or recording live in front of a live audience, sort of. All right, my audience, say hello, everybody.
Hi.
See, I have an audience tonight, so it's going to be great fun. All
Are
right,
you sure?
I'm sorry, my what?
Are you sure? You know, the
I
problem is,
always have
you know,
a great time.
I was gonna say, you know what the problem with peanut galleries is, right? They can occasionally throw peanuts.
They do, and sometimes they're funny. So it's great. We're gonna have a good time. Plus, we're talking to Brad about one of the best things ever, trains. So my first question is actually to you, Lady Styx.
Okay.
Do you like trains?
You know, I have to say, since I had boys, they grew on me. I always thought they were kind of cool, but I'm always torn about like what's better, like, true steam engine, steampunk kind of thing, aesthetic, or I'm really fascinated by the new maglev stuff and bullet trains. But I will admit, when I was growing up, I always thought the best portable house would be a caboose that you could live in and just travel the country. So yeah, I guess I do like trains.
That okay, Mr. Pink. Since you're here, do you like trains?
Oh yeah.
I do too. All right, Peanut.
I,
Do you guys like trains?
Yeah, they're neat.
Yeah. Come on, other peanut galleries, say yes. Yes, there we go. Sorry, Mr. Pink, were you going to tell us more about your love of trains?
I muted myself, and I spent time on trains in Europe about 30 years ago. They were fun.
See, this is going to be so much fun. So here's the thing I do know. I know that Brad really likes trains.
well, I'm the line developer for a steampunk RPG, so that kind of makes sense.
Well, okay, that's it. That's an interesting right there because it's something that Lady Styx said. So it is a steampunk type of game. So, because she mentioned bullet trains and some other ones, what's the best type of train?
So, I am partial to Steam myself, and it's really because there's no real other method where you get to see all the mechanicals functioning and in motion the same way. You actually get to see the steam rods pumping everything, pisting and moving and everything like that. I mean, you can see some of that on like an internal combustion engine, but most of the actual work that's being done is all contained inside the engine, inside the cylinders, because that's where the combustion is, and it has to be contained to generate pressure. With steam, you don't have that problem. It's just fire under under a boiler, and the water's boiling inside.
My personal answer is depends on setting, but the thing I like about steam trains is that you can feel them, taste them. It's like a complete sensory experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Brad, I need you to pick your favorite train. And you can only pick one. However, if you choose wrong, you will likely explode. Go.
Well, I'll likely explode anyway. But so it is hard to pick any one specific because there's so many different things different aspects in different eras and different time frames, just different environments,
Why
all
do
the
you
different
think
things.
I said you could only pick one or you would explode?
Well, yeah. So, there's a bunch of different places that you could go. When we were talked about that, I think my favorite of the ones that we've talked about in the game setting is the engine that I had actually written up a specs and a design for, which is for the Camelback engines that we have in Fort Alice source book.
Okay, I'm gonna be dumb, I guess. What's a camelback engine?
So a Camelback engine this was an interesting method that was used to try and solve a problem with sizes of fireboxes, and it depends on the era of Steam that you're talking about. It gets into the sizing with how everything and physically how you can fit everything between a set of rails and just all the different mechanicals. But it reached a certain point where they needed to get fireboxes that were larger than what they could really support. So within the existing framework, just from the mechanicals and designs that they had worked out, it got to the point where the fireboxes were so large that you wouldn't be able to see over them to effectively drive the engine. So to make the fireboxes still large enough, what they did is they moved the cab up on top of the boiler. And I will send you a picture if you want to put it in. I'll put it in the text, and if you want to pull it up on the stream here.
Of course I do.
This sounds kind of dangerous to me.
What? Him giving me a picture? No, he's a
No,
safe person. He's only gonna send me nice, work appropriate pictures. You're welcome,
from
Brad. I got you.
from what I know about steam engines, I don't want to be on top of the boiler, especially if, maybe somebody's shooting at me.
There are some issues with some of that. So, but yeah, if you pull up the picture that's in the text, you'll see that one. So that's an example of what a Camelback engine does. And you can see you've got the big cab sitting on top of the boiler. That's where the actual engineer driver sits, and then that big slope in the back is the access to the firebox, and that's where the fireman's sitting there shoveling coal in. Or in a lot of the cases, they were using anthracite waste. That was part of the reason they were using these larger fireboxes is because these were around mines, mostly around Pennsylvania, but different mines in different areas. They would get anthracite waste, which is combustible, but it's nowhere near got as much energy as coal. But it was free, and railroads are notorious for, hey, if I can save money, I'm going to find a way to save money. So they would design the engines and build them with these massive fireboxes so they could use this cheap free fuel, even though it didn't burn as well. But it was because all you really have to do is burn something to boil water.
So
So
they
the,
had to
the
go bigger because it's less efficient.
Yes, so you had to get a bigger firebox to get enough combustion in order to actually boil the water effectively. If you kept it in a smaller firebox, you wouldn't get enough high enough temperature, you wouldn't boil the water, you wouldn't generate enough steam. But you are correct, there were some dangers associated with these. The largest problems with these is number one, the fireman has no cover. You can see on the back where the slope goes down, where he would be sitting there shoveling coal. He's exposed to the elements, so he's got absolutely nothing to protect him as the train's moving along. Number two, the engineer being up on top, not only is that going to be dangerous, it's going to be bloody hot because he's right on top of the boiler and all the heat's going to rise. Number three, if anything breaks in the linkage, it's going to be right up there into the cab because he's sitting right above it. Plus, there is the issues with it being top heavy, with different things that you put too much weight up high, you have a tendency to fall over if you're taking a curve too fast. What I did with my design to address a lot of these is rather than make it a tender engine, where you see the tender in the back that heads the cold water, instead I designed mine as tank engines. So just above all the linkage with the driving wheels, there were big water tanks on the side. So if anything breaks, it's going to hit the water tanks before it ever hits the engineer. So it helps address that. Number two, since you no longer have a tender hanging around the back, you could cover that back area much easier, and now the fireman has protection. And then being that it's a tank engine, it's much more effective at going forwards and backwards. You could reverse and forward, and you don't have to worry about having a tender banging around behind you.
So, Brad, is this thing more efficient? I mean, like, why, other than it's cheaper, is that the only reason to do this? Because it
That's
seems
the
to
ma-
me like the Chinese torture device of steam engines.
It's the main reason for doing it is so that you could burn those cheaper fuels. Now, in the game setting where I introduced these engines, the reason they were using them largely is they use them for scouting engines in the Grove. Because as you're talking about it being hostile territory and potentially getting shot at, yeah, that's a big concern in that deep, high danger adventuring environment. So they could set up some of these to have a patrol of soldiers up in the cab with them, patrol down the tracks, and then they have a mobile shooting platform.
Gonna say, where's the guns? I'm a good RPGer. Where's my guns? Should have guns all over that thing. So you're saying
Yes.
instead of mounting guns, they would just put like soldiers on it, and the soldiers would like hang out all over it shooting.
Well, would do both because the one that I designed extended the front forward a bit more, and created a platform for a large steam cannon, so that would just pull steam off of the boiler to be able to just shoot a cannonball out with steam pressure. But that also had a very large cow catcher on the front, so that if something was blocking the line, they could potentially just ram through it to clear the obstruction. And then that also provided them some cover if they needed to try and shoot at things from there. But yes, you would also have soldiers up in the top, and that would just make a mobile shooting platform. You have elevation, and that just goes along the track with you.
See, I like this idea.
It's a
So
locomotive tank.
yeah, but you have to have a track for it to go. So I mean, hear me out. Trains are a just representative of a machine in an RPG. You could have a car, you could have a plane, you could have a airship, you could have a boat. All of them have pluses and minuses. I would say that the biggest penalty with trains is going to be that it has to be on a track, right? We don't have any
Yes, it would
trackless
have.
trains, do we?
I,
Like
I mean,
that's
a trackless train is a car.
that's yeah. So how do you feel they work out as things to add into gameplay?
So doing things in gameplay, number one, it just gives you the opportunity to be able to move people and things very fast and be able to move large groups of them or just large stuff. Uh, that is the main advantage of Steam is, and why you would want to have a track is that you have all of that pathing pre-laid. And with trains, they use steel on steel rails, which has a very low coefficient of friction. So it doesn't take a lot of energy to get these big heavy loads moving. Whereas like trying to move on a car, you'd have to have a whole lot of power and a whole lot of machines doing this stuff. But with a train, you could have a single engine pulling a long rake of cars.
Right. So as an RPG, I mean, in some ways it helps make planning easier. I can see using this for earlier role players because you know the route it's taking. So if you are doing some sort of like stealing something from a train or protecting something on a train, I think having that kind of linearness could be useful. What do you think
Yep,
about
and
for
Well,
some
earlier
in certain
games?
cases, having it linear and contained like that is useful. But do bear in mind, tracks go a lot of different places, and you can also switch the train, and then it could go off the rails.
yeah,
Not literally, but the adventure could.
my inner ogress is just saying, how can I break this? Like, how can I wreck the tracks to make it explode? Like, how can I get it off the tracks so that I could get to the people?
Okay, wait, are we exploding it or getting it off the track? Because I think these are separate
Yes.
but both
No, they
awesome.
could be the same. You could do
Wait,
I
no. So, Brad, one, how do we explode it? Two, how do we knock it off the track? Or three, do both.
So
Haha.
yeah, there are lots of different ways to do both, and it depends on really what your end goal and how destructive you want it to be. Because like if there's stuff on the train that you want, you might want to stop it, but you may not want to destroy it because you want the stuff or the people or whatever. But you may just want everything to go away. So yeah, you could just have the thing blow up. So one of the easiest methods, really, if you're just going to explode an engine, would be take the crew out of the way and just not monitor the water pressure. If the water injectors are not run periodically to put water into the boiler, eventually it's going to run dry. You're going to get a whole lot of buildup of pressure, and it's just going to explode. The boiler has to have water on there consistently to keep the crown sheet, which is the top of the firebox, keep that cool enough so that it's not burning dry.
I think I have a dumb question again.
Okay, go
So the
ahead.
engines are always in the front of trains, or the engines are sometimes in the back?
Sometimes they are in the back. Most of the time they're in the front. Sometimes you have a middle engine. It depends
Wait,
on a
wait,
lot
wait,
of
wait.
different factors.
I've never heard of a middle engine. Why would we
You,
have a
you
middle engine?
There are a lot of different factors. And the main reason you usually see a train up front has to do with how the pressures and everything tie in when it's pulling the coaches or cars or whatever you have behind you. Things work better when you're pulling them under tension. So think of it like if you had a couple of blocks of wood and you with the string tied between them. If you're trying to push one along, it tends to want to wobble and go, wiggle around and go crazy. But if you're pulling it, you pull from the front, the one behind it trails along behind it. Or just like if you think of those little kids' toys that they had with usually they had like the little wheel ducks and that sort of thing. You pull those along and then it follows right along behind you. If you tried to push it, it would just tend to wiggle and wander. So that is why you usually see the engine up front. You might see an engine in back if you needed to give additional power to get a train started, but you don't want to necessarily keep that engine going with you the entire trip. You would see that very often pulling out of a station, particularly with steam trains, where you'd have the main engine up front pulling the train, but it needs additional power to just get the train moving, just kind of break into that initial inertia and get things going. So you'd have the station's pilot engine push from behind but not be coupled to the train. Once it pushes for a little bit, it gets it rolling, and then it can just stop. And the pilot engine stays behind, but the rest of the train carries on. You might have a train in the middle if you had particular boundary conditions, like say you have a bridge that can only take so much weight at once, but you have to have enough enough engines pulling to keep the train moving. You might have a one in the middle to spread out the weight. So that way, once the front engine is off of the bridge, the next one can come on, because that's where a lot of your weight is going to be.
So we had a comment from Mr. Pink who said that they might split an engine, have a middle engine for if you wanted to split the train. So like all aboard, but only half are going to Chicago and then the other half are going to like Minneapolis or something like that. So
That
all
is
going to
also a possibility.
yeah,
Yep,
so I thought that was cool.
you
Apparently
definitely could do
Mr.
that.
Pink knows about trains.
In the days of steam, when we're talking about with 1879, and particularly over on the British railways, they also had a trick they would do with that called slip coaches. And what those were coaches that would go on the back end of the train, where inside the coach somebody could pull a lever to disconnect it from the train, and then they would apply the brakes and let it slide into the station. So you'd have your engineer put some speed on, so that way once the back engine breaks loose, the rest of the train can get going again, so that it's not it doesn't bang into the back. And then whoever is in the slip coach pulls the lever, lets it go, and then has to time the brakes correctly so that it stops at the station platform.
Sounds very complex. My
It
inner
is very
5-year-old
complex.
my inner 5-year-old just wants to know how I make it blow bubbles out of the stack.
Oh, you put soap in. I'm pretty sure that's the answer.
I think so too.
Brad, how do we make bubbles come out the stack?
Well, you probably wouldn't be able to put anything inside the engine, because inside of the stack, that's all where the steam and exhaust from the fire is all getting jetted out. But if you put something going across the top of the stack, you could probably blow a bubble at some point there. at least until it all dries out, because there's
This
going to
is-
be a lot of heat.
But this is why I love Brad. Even when you come up with something like, how do I make bubbles come out the stack? He never picks on us. He never makes fun of me. He just goes, well, it would be hard, but maybe. That's why he's so great. So now I
I always
know.
thought it'd
Oh,
be
go
kind
ahead.
of cool. I always thought it'd be kind of cool to do kind of a cyberpunk thing where the somehow, and I can never figure out quite how to do it because you almost would need a steam engine because you'd need the steam, right? Where you could put a psychedelic in the steam, and as you drove through town, it would cause everybody to get high or not remember, which means then you and your group could just go through and hit every bank in town. But I can never quite work that one out. I try. Lots of
That
half-baked ideas here.
that would be difficult, but not necessarily impossible. The thing to bear in mind is the temperatures inside the firebox are insane. They get super, super hot.
Yeah, but couldn't you just
So
put like a giant tea bag on the top that the steam would have to go through? There's all kinds of weird ideas here, Brett. I'm telling you.
there are potential things you could do
I feel
there.
like
What
this is systematically correct. We're going to use a drug tea bag put over the stack.
what
Do you
you would
not see this?
probably
This is so
do
1879. I'm just saying.
what you would probably do if you wanted to do something like that would be put something in the oil system and then open up the cylinder cocks because as you're driving through. Because what they do with the cylinders, uh, the things to remember about how steam and water work: steam is compressible because it is a gas. Water is not compressible. So if the piston is pushing and there's water condensed inside of that piston, it can just blow the heads off the piston if it's not getting through. In order to prevent that from happening, they have what are called the cylinder cocks, and they will open up to blast steam through the cylinders to just either blast water out of the cylinder or put enough heat into the cylinder that it all instantly converts into steam and blows away. Now, when you're doing that, you add your oil and grease and that sort of thing to help keep things lubricated so that when you're opening up the cylinder cocks, you just pop that open, blasts everything through. So that's where you usually see when it's an engine's pulling out of a station. You always see that in the movies where they get the big blast of steam. They
Yeah,
do that anytime the engine's been sitting stable for a while because there's a potential that the cylinders have cooled off enough where there's water. So you open up the cylinder cocks, blast out some steam, let that warm up, clear it out, and then you get underway again.
awesome.
So if you
We
just put some of that put some of that in the oil where it gets lubricated, you would blast it all, and then it would be right at the station, and no one would be any the wiser.
cool.
And now I know how to ruin Brad's next game. Dun, dun, dun. So, so
So,
Todd's.
Andy,
Oh, I was going to say
I was
Todd's
gonna
had a
say,
question, but
I was
sure.
gonna go the same thing. Do you want to take it or
Oh,
you want?
you do it. You
Okay.
got this.
So Todd Zurcher on the board asked a really great question, which I will admit I never thought of, but I'm interested in the answer very much, which is given elemental fire, air, and water in a fantasy setting, how would that affect steam engine development?
So it runs into some interesting problems. The biggest one where you might think you would do is put in a source of elemental water and just put that in. So now you don't have to stop for water anymore. You can just keep going because that's the main thing that they're going to run out. Most steam engines will probably run out of water about every 150 miles or so, more or less, depending on the design of the engine, the track, the exact conditions going on, that sort of thing. But that's probably your widest average. So throw in elemental water, you have a continuous source of water to put that through, and it'll just go through. The problem with that is elemental water generates as pure water, and you actually need some impurities in the water. You need minerals and stuff that will turn into scale in the boiler because that scale bonds on top of the boiler tubes and actually protects them so that they're not burning away right away. So you would have to either add impurities into it, or you would have to periodically to remove your elemental water source and run regular water through to keep a healthy build of scale inside of the boiler. As far as elemental fire is concerned, The main thing there is figuring out how to turn it off, because you don't want the fire running continuously. And if you're binding a fire elemental or that sort of thing, yeah, you could do that, but once those sort of things start burning, they tend to want to keep doing that, and it's hard to bank them down. So you'd have to figure out a method for being able to do that. As far as air is concerned, uh, that would mainly come into effect when you're dealing with later eras of trains and steam where you had air brakes. You could use that as a method rather than having to run a compressor to generate air and charge up the brakes. You could use an air elemental that could very instantly put that in and have them for an emergency braking system. There's not a whole lot of problems associated with that if you're in that particular era. But there's not a whole lot of additional benefit because running an air compressor off of the existing steam engine doesn't take up that much power.
Okay. So, not exactly, but similar. It's also a Todd C thing. He mentioned steam engine explosions are energetic. And it got me to thinking, of the different types of engines, which would blow up more spectacularly? Not that I'm
As
planning
far
on blowing up trains, but if I was going to blow up a train, would a diesel engine, a steam engine, like what train would give me the most bang for my explosion?
Depends on how you're trying to blow it up. With the steam engines, you're going to get a lot of there is definitely a lot of power there because it's all water contained under pressure. Once you release that, it tends to want to go everywhere very fast, and it's very hot, and it's going to burn everything. If you're looking for something that's going to do a whole lot of explosive damage, like combustible explosive damage, then you're probably going to be better off doing something with like a diesel engine where it has diesel fuel that's going to burn.
Okay. Have you ever ran a game where your players blew up a train?
I did actually, and that was one of my favorite stories I had with one of the Gen Con demos. So one of our demos we have is called Big Damn Heroes. You had actually did the play test for that one, and then I had modified it later,
I
just
did?
updating.
Did
Yes,
I blow up your
you,
train?
no, you didn't blow up the train,
Did I
but
try?
you did. No, you just took over the train,
Oh, that sounds more like me. I stole a train. That I
pretty
can
much.
see.
But what they ended up doing, so at the end of the scenario, they're trying to get to a dam. They have an old steam engine that they're taking to be able to get to the dam, to try and investigate why the dam has stopped responding, because it responds based off of analytical engine. And they find that there's a dinosaur that has made a nest in there, ate the guards who were watching the dam, and now they have to try and get rid of the dino. What they the players ended up doing was they got in, they managed to get the dinosaur distracted. Somebody ran in, stole the dinosaur's egg, so it goes chasing after the person with the egg. That person runs to the engine, lays it down in the cab, jumps out the other side. So the dino jumps into the cab trying to get back at its egg. And then they had a mage which had a remote control power, a spell that allows you to control devices from a distance. So they engaged that spell to drive the engine forward. And the engine just goes flying forward at full tilt because that's what he told it to do. It ends up skipping over the rails because it takes a curve too fast and it goes tumbling down a cliff and explodes.
All
So
right, we
did
have
they
another.
actually explode it, or did they just run it off the rails?
Oh, it ran off the rails, but it exploded once it hit because it was coming up a switchback, so it was a very large. It
Got it,
was
got
like
it.
up a hill. So once it ran off the rails going down the switchback, it tumbled down, and yeah, the whole thing exploded once it made impact at the bottom.
So apparently there are two types of gamers: those who explode trains and those that steal trains. Gotcha.
Not
That
necessarily mutually
what?
exclusive.
Oh, well, that's possibly true. We have another question from the audience, Mr. Pink. Miss. Oh, hello, other FASA person. Hi. Sorry, on the streaming thing. Okay, so the question here is a question about old school trains. At what point did train cars gain the failsafe of default being brakes on?
So
Well,
that
okay.
happened when they introduced air brakes. Before the invention of air brakes, what you had was a whole bunch of handbrakes on every individual car, and your train crew consisted of your engineer, your fireman, your conductor, and you had probably about 5 to 10 brakemen, depending on the size of the train, who would all, when the train needs to stop, now you can apply independent brakes on the engine, but when you need to actually stop and apply brakes in the cars in the back to get additional braking power, they would have all these brakemen who would jump out onto the cars and go apply brakes manually each and every one. So yeah, they're running on the outside of the cars. If you ever see old school cars, like the old box cars, and they see that they have a walkway up on top of them, that's legit. That's why they had that, and they would have ladders that would let you get climb up to the top there. That was so the brakeman could go running while the train is in motion to go get to the brakes and actually apply them to stop. Once they developed air brakes, what you had then was an air compressor on the steam engine, and then you connected, when you did the coupling, you would also connect the air pressure. What actually happened with it is the air compressor would apply pressure to all along the train as the compressor's powering up. It charges up air, it pushes that out, and that actually opens the brakes. So if the air ever got disconnected, like say a car breaks loose from the train, when it's disconnected, there is no longer anything pumping air to keep the brakes open, and then they start closing up and will come to a stop.
So the only history thing I know about trains is that women were not allowed on trains for a while because they thought that the speed of which like it would stop would jiggle our uteruses around or something silly, and that it was very very bad, especially for pregnant women for the longest time, or at least that's what they thought. So
There are quite a few dumb things that people thought of in history.
but it no, but it was a weird stupid thing. That's like the only historical I think train thing I know. Um, So stop the air
Question.
pressure, stop the train. That's a lot like semi trucks because they have air brakes too.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Pink, very good.
But
Todd Z has a question. Any games out there where operating a train was used as a plot device vehicle for adventures? Kind of like Traveler on Rails. That is a good question, Brad. Do you know of any?
I don't know of full game lines set up like that. Would be very interested to go through one. Um,
I think I only know of like board games. There's some board games where the train is the main device, I think. I swear I've seen some.
uh, I
But I don't
will
know of any
say
RPGs.
I will say, and this will be a little bit of a leak, just to kind of to give a little bit of a hint for the next Gen Con scenario for next year. I want that one to be based around a train. It will be in the Americas. I haven't decided if I want to make it a heist on a train, a murder mystery on a train, or a combination of the two.
All I know about train scenarios is that my favorite authors, Aaron Hadley and Kitty Cox in their Gamer Girl series, where they wrote about first person shooters and competitiveness and all kinds of stuff, did a scenario where they had a setup with passenger and freight cars and multiple side by side tracks. And they had people jumping not just cars, but trains trying to get information and to go after different people. And I always thought it would be really cool to do a scenario where that was part of the gig to like try to solve the thing was to have to jump and find on different trains and different cars all the stuff to be able to either defuse the bomb on the trains or blow the trains up or something like that. I always thought it would be really cool to use that as a plot device.
That would be an interesting one to try and work out, especially depending on where the destinations are for the different trains.
Yes.
So I know I see a bunch of people typing, but while we're waiting for them to type, what do you what would be your best advice for GMs wanting to use trains in their games? Like where would you suggest they start? Where would you suggest they focus in the beginning?
Well, the main thing to consider is the purpose for the train, and it's going to be moving people and stuff from one place to another. So, if you have an adventure that you have in one place and you need to get to another destination far away, or you've heard about a clue, or you have some big thing that you need to get moved, that would be where you bring in the train so that it makes sense that it takes place in the scenario. From there, you need to consider whether you want it to be just using the train as that plot device to get from one place to the other, or if you want the train to be part of an adventure in and of itself, because it takes time to go from one place to another, travel back and forth. So it really makes it brings a live phrase. It's not the destination; it's the journey, and you actually get to take the place. A lot of the stuff is all taking place within the train itself. So if you bring in things where unexpected things happen, you can run into different people, different things that are being moved similarly on the train, because it's very rare that you would have just one set of people, one purpose for them. They usually would combine as much as possible to move stuff from one place to another. It may be other stops along the way, may lead to other adventures and things along the way. So think about where what your purpose is for where the train is going, and then where else could it expand beyond that point.
Oh, so I have comments on this. Um, Todd FASA Todd posted specifically that he was interested in future trains and tying into that, like everybody going in one place or something like that. His thought was that he was thinking about like far-flung colonies built in biodomes could use maglev type steel trains for mass transportation and bulk cargo hauling, like to a centrally located spaceport, or even going from one place to another, which there's some really cool sci-fi movies that take that premise. Um, Snowpiercer being one of them, where like they like go through parts of like mountains and stuff like that, trying to stay ahead of the problem. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then, oh, sorry,
So
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, Todd Zurcher asked a question that I actually know the answer to. That's a train question. And that those questions were there ever independent operators for trains, or were they all corporate properties? And there were independent operators, especially because a lot of people would own private cars that they would just switch from. That's where I originally got my idea of living in a caboose, was they
Mm-hmm.
had private cars that they would transfer from train line to train line.
Yep, you would have that for being able to move along, and then you could tie your private coach to a corporate, to something that's owned by a corporate or big national entity. But there are for operators, there were and still are short line operators, and that was an independent group, either person, company, business, whatever, that would have control a stretch of track that they purchase, that they maintain, they run, and they're doing fulfilling a service that the main line is not able to fulfill. You would get that frequently for mainly for doing like local runs for specific businesses. Uh, if the main line doesn't have it doesn't make sense to keep enough engines around to be able to do all the switching maneuvers that the business would need. You could have a short line maintain all of that to handle moving all of their cars about. So you just have the main line kind of come through, bring in deliveries, take away shipments out, and then you have the short line come through and handle switching everything back and forth to the independent businesses, and then they would be on call to handle things much faster. There are a bunch of other reasons for why you might have a short line. Way too many to really get into the specifics, and they would all be really dependent upon the specific area. But yeah, there's tons of reasons for why you would have a short line.
Let's see. If well, I would ask you what storyline you would write if you were going to write one with a train, but you already wrote one and you're going to write another one.
Oh, there's been a
How about
couple
as
of
a
them that involve
player?
trains, but
How about as a player? Have you ever gotten to play in a game where there's a train as a main part of a component to the story?
I don't think I've ever actually had anybody else run a game with a train
Is it
that was
because you
really
know
focused
so
on
much
it.
about them that you intimidate them? Is that what it is, Brad? Are
Possibly,
you intimidating them?
quite possibly, and not by any intention.
I think I'm gonna run one with the train now for my 1879 game. I don't know how I'm fitting it in, but I'm gonna put you guys on a train. And if you make fun
And
of my train, I'll beat you up. Yeah.
well, you'll probably just be asking me halfway through the adventure, Brad, how would this work?
Hey, we
I
use
have
the resources that are in front of us.
Oh, exactly. No, I have no problem answering that for you.
I've played in games with trains.
Have
Usually,
you?
yeah, most of the time they've been just transportation from point A to point B. Um, but I did at one of the smaller conventions I attended, it was a basically whole scenario based off of like Snowpiercer, the sci-fi movie that had been released. And it was very interesting because they had set up different sections of the train as being controlled by different factions. And your goal was to get from off the train all the way through to take control of the engine and survive. And it was very cleverly done and it was very difficult, but there was also a lot of suspension of reality to make it happen.
See, the first thing I'm thinking of just off the top of my head is basically speed. Put you guys on a train, have it go out of control, have you guys try to save everybody, including yourselves, because dying in a train crash seems bad. Just saying, it seems bad.
Just trigger Ozzy Osbourne.
Is that what it is?
Bat out of hell?
Bad.
Oh no, I was thinking Crazy Train.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
A little
that
more
makes better.
obvious.
That makes better sense. Oh goodness. All right, so let's see. We've talked a little bit about trains, a little bit about history of trains, some advice for GMs. Well, that was advice about early GMing. What about advice for GMs in general about train use?
So the biggest thing I would say in general is don't be intimidated if you don't understand all of the specifics. There are a ton of specific things to know about trains, and there's stuff that I don't know because I don't do it professionally, but I'm just an enthusiast. So don't be worried if you're gonna get some of it wrong. You probably are anyway. But if your players are having fun, they're not going to care if they even notice, and that goes for so many different things that applies for trains, general physics, chemistry, so much stuff. There's so many things that don't be afraid to try things out. Even if you don't know about it. If you don't know about it and you want to learn more to try and make it a realistic experience, there are tons of resources to go learn about it. And I even had a couple of blog posts up on the on the main FASA site that you can go look at, where I talk about some of that stuff for some of the basics to understand how the engines work, how some of the logistics work, how what it's like inside the cab of an engine, and of an engine, and then also inside the cab of a coach, and what you're likely to see in there.
See, I think
Oh,
that's great, and I think that that's absolutely true. As someone who's GM'd way too often, people don't necessarily fight you over the small details if they're having a good time at the table.
well, my thing is, I always remember the best advice I ever got as a GM when I first started was remember, all the best ideas are usually ganked from somebody else or swiped. And on that thread, NTX software guy posted on the chat that he wasn't sure if this is allowed, but he was thinking of Stephen King's book series where he has an AI train that is evil, which I think would be a really cool thing to do, like in a cyberpunk or
Future
futuristic.
train that Todd was talking about, but
Exactly.
can
Oh,
we
that
do that, Todd, in 1879? Because we have trains. We have some early
Well,
computer esky things, but not really AI.
But why can't you do one that's just possessed by like a spirit
Spirit
or
or
something?
gremlin,
Exactly.
like a fey gremlin or something. Evil brownie. Can we do
Well,
that?
Faye would have a hard time because of the cold iron weakness, but spirits definitely could. That could be something interesting. Hey, I'm not going to say that this is going to get thrown in, but if somebody else wanted to use this idea and put it into their stuff, horrors don't exist in 1879, but if you wanted to, there's that big horror called Artificer. If you made Artificer have control of a train, that could get nasty.
I like this. So now I'm putting you guys on a train that Artificer lives in. Yes, yes. But in all truth, no, this is in teaching, it's called, they tell new teachers, don't reinvent the wheel. But we get ideas for stories all over the place, and there's nothing wrong with looking at a story going, how could I put that in my game? Would my players like that? What to do? And so I think it's always great to just look at different things to get ideas, including, but not limited to, Stephen King, who likes to have lots of vehicles that are kind of crazy. Christine, Blaine, there's a few others.
I will say, if you want to learn more about stuff that can take place on a railway and get some stuff that actually has some real life basis to it, but put it to a fantasy realm, it's gonna sound weird. But if you look at the early stuff from Thomas the Tank Engine, and I'm talking like the original railroad
No, because that's
railway
scary.
series,
They have faces on them. Nobody wants to
but
look at that. They're scary looking.
ignore that, but actually look at the stories, because so much of what Audrey put in the stories were based off of real events that happened on actual railways. And you apply them to, no, you don't have to actually apply characters to the engines, but just look at the stories and things and logistics and how
Okay,
things
well,
were done. They
I
actually
need
have a
you.
basis in reality.
I need you to tell us a story and how it's based in reality now. Now I need it. I need a tale. Give example.
Yeah, of
Because this
course
is
you
kind
want
of
to.
interesting.
Wait, spot there, Andy.
Sorry,
I'm
what was
sorry, I
that?
missed that.
I said, way to put him on the spot there, Andy.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm good at that, right, Brad?
Yeah,
No,
that
but okay,
happens,
but I didn't know that
like
Thomas the Train had anything to do with reality, and now I'm super curious.
I will say it did in the early era, and that's why I say look at the stuff that was from the actual railway series. Don't look at the stuff so much from the hit era or after Mattel got a hold of it, because they just made it a show for babies, where everything's repetitive and dumb. Look at the actual original stuff. One of the ones that I actually used a little bit of inspiration for this in that same story, where I talked about with the for the adventure going up for Big Damn Heroes. This was the story of Edward's exploit and how Edward was pulling the train. He's an old engine. He's pulling this was a big train full of people because they were all enthusiasts, so it's overloaded. He's an old engine. He was a 440, and he was from the era well before this point, because this was he's well out of date, and he's overloaded. He ends up on the weather changes and then everything's raining, so he's getting wheel slip he has to deal with. His sanding gear fails, so he's having to deal with his wheels. He actually has to have somebody riding on the front sanding the rails by hand. Eventually, the wheels slip too much, and it ends up breaking the connecting rods. So they have to take off the connecting rods. So now he only has a single wheel set that's spinning. He's got half of his tractive effort, and he's trying to pull a train that's overloaded. He ends up still managing to do it through sheer determination and a little bit of ingenuity in how they manage the coaches. What they end up doing is loosening the coupling so that he can start pulling one coach that gets gets momentum going, then that pulls the second, then that pulls the third, and so on down the line. Now when the couplings are loose like that, things are going to be rattling around. You got a lot more potential for stuff to break. It's going to be more uncomfortable for the riders, so that's why they don't do that in normal operation. But when you're in dire straits and you got to move, it's either that or be stuck out in the rain. That was where they made the decision to do that, and he actually managed to pull it through. That was the event that really happened.
Okay, the Peanuts Gallery's comment is that tracks.
Yeah, exactly. Trains and puns, that's right in my MO.
Okay, we are coming up on about 5 minutes because I have yet another meeting tonight at 9. So before we wrap up totally and things like that, are there other questions from any of the audience sets that we did not get to? Pink, Mr. Pink says loose couplings make starting easier, but stopping gets rougher.
Yes. Yep,
Mr.
absolutely.
Pink actually seems to know a lot about trains too. I'm noticing this about you, Mr. Pink.
Well, while we give people a moment to if they have additional questions or anything, I do want to let everybody know I'm going to be doing a visit out, and I'm going to try to record it so that I can post it on our channel. Union Pacific's Big Boy is going to be coming out September 8th, and I'm going to try to go out and make it to a visit so I can see that one. That is the largest steam engine still in operation. But it'll be not too far from me. It's about an hour away where the stop is going to be on that day. So I'm going to make a stop out there. And like I said, I'm going to try to record that as much as I can to get you some footage so you can see what steam looked like at the peak when things were at in the high point of the heyday before dieselization took over.
I think I'm going to throw in an ad kind of product placement. You were talking about the train times, and I do know that the Maps of London has like a train schedule
Yes.
so that you could figure out how long it would take. So if people were interested in that type of thing, that would be a great place to look. Lady Styx, did we get any more questions?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Todd Zurcher says, mad idea. If I wanted to play a board game hybrid with trains and an RPG, what would you suggest?
I don't know of one specific that just for with a board game that I could throw in off the top of my head. There is the famous Ticket to Ride, which I have never actually gotten to play. So that may be something we'll have to arrange at some point.
It's cool.
If somebody's got a hold of it, and we could get arranged to play that. I have never actually been around a group that was willing to play. But since I haven't played it myself, I can't necessarily recommend it. But that's only because I don't know.
Have you played it?
Yes, I have. It's
I've
pretty
seen
cool.
it. So
With some work, it depends on how long of a game you want to play, because it would be a long game if you added in RPG stuff. But you could certainly do it. I don't see why not. It depends on how good your GM is or how mad you want to go trying to make it work.
So it's not really a board game, but there's this game and it has a train and 2 tracks, and you have to decide which people you're running over. I think that could totally be used in an RPG though.
Is that the Cyanide and Happiness one?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun actually. And
Dire-
I always am playing RPG when I'm taking the little train and like running over the cards and squishing people. So I think that counts, right?
Andy,
Close. What?
Dire Sith Lord's comment was Trial by Trolley.
That he is absolutely correct. Good job. That is the name. I'm always bad with names. You get a gold star there, sir. Trial by Trolley. It is fun. By the way. All right.
But of course, if you do want to see more about trains and stuff, pretty much everybody will have, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people will have some sort of railway museum around them. There are tons of them with a bunch of enthusiasts who try to preserve stuff. So, you could always go and check stuff out. Sometimes they'll actually run live steam engines that you can go see in preservation.
I just had the dumbest question just pop into my head, and we got very little time, but I want to do it anyhow. Do you do model trains?
I used to do model trains back when I was a kid. I have not kept up with it. It's something that I'm kind of interested in doing again at some point. I'm thinking after I can get this house sold, I would want to set something up. Although I'm also considering making myself because the next property I want to buy is going to be the one that I want to retire on. I'd like to get something wooded, and I'd like to set something up where I could make a small, actual narrow gauge railway for myself to be able to haul logs back to a shop and saw them into lumber. So
I like
would
this.
not actually be the first time I've run a steam train. I have run one when I was a kid, and that's the one moment that I could say where my childhood
Right, shoreline. Yes.
had peaked, because it was actually at Disney World. We were there. When we were going to take the train to go around to the different areas of the park, the train had to stop for water. They had all the characters out because to try and entertain kids while they're waiting for the train to fill up with water. Me being me, I wasn't interested in any of the characters. I wanted to go talk to the engineer. And he was so absolutely thrilled because he's like, nobody ever comes and talks to me. And I'm actually, going to learn about trades and stuff and having a great time. He actually let me ride in the cab with him, and I actually got to drive the train at Disney.
Very cool.
That's awesome. I would have thought that everybody went up and tried to talk. I would have thought he was beating them off with sticks. Go away, little kids.
So, and this wasn't the one where, because there is, if I remember correctly, it's Disneyland. You can actually sign up to ride in just along in the tender. There's like an hour-long wait list, but you can do it. But this wasn't that. This was at the other park where you don't normally get to ride in the engine, and it was just because I spoke with the engineer that I got to do this.
That is awesome and sweet. And I think that that's a good story to end on tonight.
Well, I would like to say thank you to everybody because I have got some really good ideas and some really good prompts to follow to either blow some trains up or start incorporating them more because I'm always interested in transportation and different uh, scenarios, different places, unexpected places to put stuff. Everybody can go into a tavern, but very few people can say, I went on a possessed train, or, we had to stop the AI from killing all the food supply before I got to the biodome, or whatever. And I really, really appreciate it, guys.
Well, I now know that Artificer is going to go on a train and I'm going to kill them all. Mwaha ha 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 ha.
Thank you, Brad, for answering all of our questions. I really appreciate it. I learned a
Oh,
lot.
absolutely. It's
You're awesome.
fun to talk about this. And if anybody gets other questions, game line, trains, any of that stuff, join the FASA Discord, poke me on there. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff.
Oh, one last question. If anybody has any suggestions for topics, please put them into the text and we would be happy to consider them for next week.
I think with that, it's time for everyone to start saying goodbye.
Bye,
Brad?
everybody.
Oh, thank you, lady.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I was gonna let everybody else go, but yeah, thanks again for having me in here. I'll post the GIF as the one to end off on.
That's cute. All right. Peanut Gallery, would you like to say goodbye real quick?
Bye.
I'm going to stop the stream, so everyone, it's been great seeing you.